And so even though like, Eddie Van Halen would be the reason I play guitar as a kid in high school, John Williams would be the reason I loved music. He kind of
Yeah.
like started my heart beating.
Really?
Definitely.
Huh.
Man. I mean,
Okay.
me and about a million other composers, but
Yeah. Yeah. And you were 7 years old and you knew you had a true north of like,
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have been the kid that said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And
right.
I wouldn't have been 7 saying like, "I want to write music for movies." But I was like, that sound is in my head all the time. When I'm riding my bike,
Yeah.
I hear John Williams. When I'm in the woods dreaming of spooky stories, I hear, it was just,
Yeah.
it was infusing.
Yeah. I love that.
And then it would be years later that I would go, "Oh, that's what I want to do."
Yeah. And you grew up as a guitar player originally, right?
Yeah.
Pre-composer, pre-producer.
Yeah. Although I always say that, I started playing guitar in high school really because I stopped playing baseball. I was this baseball fanatic kid, and all of a sudden I just stopped. I didn't try out. And I think my mom knew that a bored high school kid is probably the worst thing that can happen,
Right.
And so my mom was like, "Hey, if I pay for guitar lessons, would you take them?" And that just so happened that I had discovered Van Halen's
Right.
music. And so it was sort of like guitar, Van Halen, this is fun.
Yeah.
And so that would be why I played. But it was funny because guitar for me was really about finding my own voice and about, even though I like to learn everybody's riffs, I wanted to write my own riff. I wanted to be the guy that wrote a riff that the next generation of kiddos would want to play.
Yeah.
So guitar was more of like a creative avenue more than a virtuosic.
Yeah.
You know.
Were you better? And we'll talk about Van Halen a little bit more. I know you and I have that.
Yeah,
same
we have
DNA.
that in common.
Were you more of, hey, I want to create my own thing, or an imitator? I'm better at imitating people.
Well, that's a great question because
you know what I mean?
Imitation.
Some people are really good imitators.
Imitation is a really important trait to have to a degree, but it also can become a prison. For me, I was a good imitator. I was a good imitator of a lot of things, especially as a young composer. And that's ultimately what got me work. And it's what got me hired to become a ghostwriter for the gentleman I worked for, is that I could imitate a lot. I could listen to a piece of music and I could understand what makes it tick.
Right.
So the biggest part,
and I'm not saying it's bad being imitated.
No.
I mean, there is a time to imitate and to figure other people's processes
there is.
out. Right.
And I think ultimately for me, the biggest part of my journey was figuring out how to be me.
Yeah.
And it's taken, I'm not going to lie, it's taken 25 years for me to figure out who am I? What do I have to say? How can I kind of honor my influences, but still pursue something that I feel is artistically satisfying? And so the same would be true for guitar. There were a lot of guitar players I could imitate, and you would go, "Oh man, your phrasing really sounds like so-and-so."
Right.
And all of a sudden I'm like, my gosh, well, who am I? If I don't have anything to say, this stinks.
And who cares? Like if you're the 400th best,
who cares?
Pat Metheny clone or Van Halen clone. It's like,
who cares?
Okay, you got to get in the game sometime. So you might as well stand on your own feet sooner rather than later.
Totally. It's funny. Rolling Stone, once they put out this thing of like the 100 best guitar players of all time, and you could argue the list whether it's valid or not, but they had it like grouped into like shredders, super shredders, blues guys, and innovators. And it was funny because all of the guitar players I liked fell into the innovator category.
Interesting.
And so it's important. It's like, you don't have to be the best, but have something to say. Have something to say that's your own.
Yeah. It's funny because those kind of originals, those forces of nature, the Zappas, the Pat Metheny's, the people that came out of the chute just being themselves. Van Halen was like that too.
Yeah, Eddie's like that.
But it's like those are the people. It's like the originals.
Yeah.
They're not trying to be chameleons or squishy. They're like, this is my voice. This is what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of Van Halen, what was kind of what records meant the most to you growing up? What were your?
Well, it's funny because I have this saying that like the power of the first mention. I feel like the power of the first mention is so important for, whether you're a kid, they hear your version.
Tell me what that is.
Well, like, for most children, the first mention is going to be from their parents whether it's the lens of religion or the lens of politics or the
Okay.
lens of money. And that is going to be how, if your parents are affiliated with a certain political party, you will have that leaning just because they were the first ones to say it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And for me, Diver Down was
Mm,
that's the record that was out when I discovered Van Halen. And so I have this leaning to Diver Down, Diver Down.
right.
Fair Warning would become my favorite record of all time for Van Halen. I
Yeah.
loved the tenacity of that. But again, Diver Down. So I showed what record do I show my kids when it was time to show them Van Halen? I showed them Diver Down.
Yeah. I love that.
So the power of the first mention for them becomes the same thing for me,
Yeah. That's great. A lot of people kind of poo-poo Diver Down.
I can understand why.
And I mean, yes, it's like what, 28 minutes long?
Sure,
It's
a lot
not
of cover tunes.
not a long record. But if you weight it, with music nowadays or however you want to weight things, it's like there are some hang 'em high on that.
Oh,
That
hang 'em
record.
high. My little son thinks that riff's the coolest riff in the world.
Cathedral.
Yeah, it's so cool.
I mean, it's like if you just take those two songs, it's like, dude, those are brilliant secrets.
Yeah.
I mean, those are classic, and a lot of people miss, to me, the thing beyond all the whammy bar tapping, blah blah blah, spandex pants, whatever, the Jack Daniels bass. The thing people miss the most, and that I think is the differentiator for Van Halen, is their songs.
Yeah.
They wrote songs when people were just writing riffs.
Yeah.
And writing excuses to solo.
Right.
Those songs
Absolutely.
hold up. Secrets. I mean, Hang 'em High, Secrets, they're just fantastic compositions that nobody talks about. They're like, oh, well, Eddie did this for 30 years. And it's like, well, yeah, but he built a foundation of songs that really hold up through time. So
totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah, so you're Diver Down, Fair Warning.
Yeah, that's
Nice.
me. I wasn't much of the Hagar era.
No, dude, I'm with you.
it kind of lost me, and I've never even acknowledged that to my children. So it's not even part of canon, I guess. And,
Canon, yes, I'm with you.
So
I'm with and we'll get off Van Halen.
yeah, we'll get off Van Halen. It's not fair. It's not.
When we got married, when Rob and I got married, she was not aware of Van Halen at all.
Nor was my wife.
So
No.
so we did this thing called Van Halen School, to where we'd talk about one thing for, I don't know, it was kind of funny, but that's good. Yeah, those records, it's funny how much they hold up.
Yeah, they still hold up.
And Ted Templeman and Don Landee, I think played a larger role than people give them credit for.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's great. So coming up with guitar and becoming a scoring composer, those are like very different DNA headspaces. How did you go from guitar guy into John Williams land? What was that path like for you?